It's funny how one phone call can change everything. The moment I heard her voice on the other end, I knew something was off. It wasn't the usual warmth, the normal, "Hey babe, how's your day?" It was a tone I hadn't heard in years, the kind of coldness that creeps in when people have already made up their minds about something, but haven't quite had the guts to say it yet. I didn't ask her what was wrong at first. I didn't even say anything. I just listened as she hesitated, as if searching for the right words to say. Her breath caught for a moment, and then she spoke, the words coming out slowly, like they had been weighing her down for a long time. I think we need to talk when you get home," she said. The line went quiet for a moment. I felt it deep in my chest, a dull thud, like something was falling apart, and I had no control over it. But I didn't press. I just hung up the phone, wondering why the hell this always seemed to happen to me. It wasn't the first time she'd said, "We need to talk." I'd heard those words before, and each time they came with a little more finality, a little more distance. But this time, something felt different. I didn't need to be told that. The way she said it made it clear. Whatever was coming, I wasn't going to like it. I didn't get home until later that night, around 11:30 p.m. The house was still and quiet when I walked in. Claire's car was parked in the driveway, but there was no sign of her. I tossed my keys on the kitchen counter and called out her name. No response. I checked the living room, the kitchen, and even the guest bedroom. Nothing. Not a sound. I felt a little disoriented, my thoughts racing. Where the hell was she? She wasn't in bed, and the light in the bathroom was off. The whole house felt off, like a room that was missing its soul. Just as I was about to sit down and call her, my phone buzzed. It was a message from her. "I'm sorry. I had to step out for a bit. Can you give me a few minutes? I'm almost back." I stared at the screen for a while. A few minutes? What was that supposed to mean? She'd been gone for hours. And the way she'd written it, so impersonal. Like she wasn't even talking to me, just a stranger. The pit in my stomach deepened. I sat down, leaned back in my chair, and stared out the window. The quiet of the house pressed in on me, and I couldn't help but wonder what she had been doing all evening. Where had she really gone? Who was she with? 20 minutes later, she walked in. But there was no apology, no explanation. She didn't even look at me. She just hung her coat up, took off her shoes, and headed straight to the kitchen. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words wouldn't come. I just watched her as she moved about the house, like she didn't even see me sitting there. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke, her voice cold. I think we need to talk." The irony of it hit me all at once. I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, I felt strangely detached. Like I wasn't even sure I cared anymore. "Yeah, I figured that," I replied, leaning forward in my chair. She took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, eyes fixed on the floor. I watched her for a while, the weight of her silence hanging in the air. "It's not you, it's me," she started. The words were so rehearsed, so predictable, that it almost made me laugh. But I didn't. I just waited. "I'm not happy anymore, Owen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I just don't think we're right for each other." I blinked, not sure if I had heard her correctly. The words didn't even feel real. "Wait, what?" I said, my voice rising without meaning to. "What are you talking about?" "I don't think I want to be with you anymore," she said, the words cutting through the air like a knife. I felt a strange numbness take over. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My mind raced, but nothing made sense. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me, and continued. "I've met someone else." I wasn't sure if it was the shock or the disbelief, but everything around me felt like it was spinning. I stood up and walked toward her, but she didn't turn around. She just stared out the window, her reflection almost lost in the glass. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her shoulders tensed. "It doesn't matter. He's just someone I met through work. But it's not about him. It's about me." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I just stood there, watching her. "I don't know when it happened," she continued, her voice softer now. "I thought I could ignore it, but I can't anymore. I don't love you the way I used to." The words hit me harder than any punch ever could. I didn't know how to process them, how to deal with the fact that the woman I had given my life to, the one person I thought I could always count on, had already moved on. I didn't know what came over me, but I reached for my phone and dialed a number. I didn't even think twice about it. "Yeah, I need to start the process," I said when the voice on the other end answered. I need divorce papers. I didn't even look at her as I spoke. I could hear her behind me, but I didn't care. The numbness was starting to fade, replaced by something colder, something sharper. I hung up the phone, turned around, and walked back to where she stood by the window. You're free next week, Claire. I'll handle the papers, I said, my voice steady. She froze. Her face went pale. And for the first time that night, she looked at me, really looked at me. Wait, what? She whispered, almost too quietly to hear. And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. The next few days felt like a blur. I moved through the motions, getting up, going to work, coming home, but nothing felt the same. Claire wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. There was a coldness in the air that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just her words that cut me. It was the way she didn't seem to care. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. What did I miss? When did everything change? Had she been unhappy all along, and I just couldn't see it? I tried to talk to her after that night, tried to make sense of things, but every time I brought it up, she'd shut me down. Owen, please, let's just leave it alone for now, she'd say. But how could I leave it alone? My mind wouldn't let me. It couldn't. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing her breathing softly next to me, and yet feeling like we were miles apart. The intimacy we once shared was gone, replaced by a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. I could feel the space between us growing every day, and I didn't know how to fill it. I didn't know how to make her see that I was still here, that I still wanted to fight for us. But she wasn't fighting for us. That much was clear. I saw the way she acted around me now, how she'd avoid eye contact when we spoke, how she'd always have an excuse to leave the house. And the more she pulled away, the more I wanted to understand what had really happened. What had gone wrong? Was it my fault? Was I really that blind? One evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen after dinner, I heard the faint sound of a ringtone from Claire's phone in the other room. She had gone out earlier with her work friends, another one of those vague excuses that had become all too familiar. I didn't think much of it at first. I was used to her phone going off. It wasn't unusual. But this time, the ringtone sounded different, more urgent. Without thinking, I walked into the living room and picked up her phone. It wasn't a work call. The name on the screen hit me like a punch in the gut, Ben. I stared at it for a few moments, the phone growing heavier in my hand. Ben. That name had come up more times than I could count. She had mentioned him in passing, always with a smile, always too casually. Ben this, Ben that. Like he was just some coworker, just some guy she'd been spending time with. But this felt different. I debated with myself for a moment, my finger hovering over the screen. Should I answer it? Should I confront her about this right now? I could already feel my heart racing, my pulse pounding in my ears. I knew I was crossing a line. But in that moment, I didn't care. My instincts told me that something wasn't right. I swiped the screen to answer. Hey, it's Claire. I'll be back in a few. I heard a man's voice on the other end, casual and smooth, as if he had every right to be speaking to her like this. My heart dropped. He was too comfortable, too familiar. I didn't know what to do with the surge of emotions that hit me. Anger, confusion, betrayal, all at once. Who is this? I managed to say, my voice coming out colder than I expected. The line went silent for a moment. And then the voice came back, no longer as casual. This is Ben. Is everything okay? I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but the words were stuck in my throat. It wasn't his fault. It was hers. Claire was the one who had allowed this. She had let this happen, and she had lied to me all along. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking. I dropped the phone onto the couch, almost afraid to pick it up again. My mind was racing, spinning out of control. I couldn't process this. I couldn't deal with this. But I had no choice. The truth was staring me in the face, and I had to face it head on. Claire came home a few minutes later. She didn't say anything at first, just walked past me, her eyes darting nervously. She knew. She had to know I knew something was off. But she didn't say a word about it. She didn't ask why I was sitting there with the phone on the couch. I stood up slowly, not sure how to approach this. Not sure what to say. I wanted to yell. I wanted to accuse her. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her. What's going on, Claire? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She froze, caught off guard by my question. For a moment, it looked like she might say something, an apology, an explanation. But instead, she just shrugged, like it was all no big deal. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice flat. I took a step toward her, my voice growing more desperate. Don't lie to me. Who is Ben? For a second, she looked like she might break. Her eyes flickered with something, guilt, maybe? But then it was gone, replaced by a blank expression. He's just a guy I've been working with. Nothing more. But I didn't believe her. I couldn't. Everything about her tone was off. Everything about her felt wrong. It didn't add up. I stood there for a few more moments, just staring at her. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the words I wanted to say were stuck in my throat. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. Finally, I just said it. I'm done pretending, Claire. If this is how it's going to be, then I'm not going to sit around and let you do this to me. Her face went pale, but she didn't say anything. I turned and walked toward the door, but just before I left the room, I turned back. Let him know you'll be free next week. I'll handle the divorce papers. She didn't respond. She just stood there, frozen. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control again. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to make sense of everything. It felt like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Claire was still at the house, still in her routine, acting as if nothing had changed, but I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me, and I had no way of stopping it. The silence between us had become unbearable, thick with unspoken words, with secrets that hung like a dark cloud. I kept replaying the phone call over and over in my head. Ben, the man who had taken her attention, her affection, when I wasn't looking. The man who had been there, filling the void that I had failed to see until it was too late. I wasn't just angry at Claire. I was angry at myself for not seeing the warning signs sooner, for being so blind to the changes in her behavior, to the way she had slowly drifted away from me without me even realizing. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had been building up to this moment, and I had missed it all. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the distant glances. They had all been pointing to one thing, and I had refused to believe it. Claire barely spoke to me after that night. She'd go about her day, her life, like I wasn't even there. It was like I was invisible to her, a ghost in my own home. I tried to engage her, tried to get answers, but every time I reached out, she shut me down. I asked her about Ben, and she gave me the same story. He was just a coworker. Nothing more. But I could see it in her eyes. She was lying. There was no remorse, no apology, just excuses. And then, one evening, when I came home from work, I found the note. It was simple, written on a small scrap of paper, left on the kitchen counter, and it was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I've gone to stay with my sister for a few days. I need space, Owen. Please respect that. We'll talk when I get back. That was it. No explanation. No discussion. Just a statement. She had left, but there was nothing in her words that gave me any hope that she was coming back. She was done. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the note, feeling the weight of it sink into my chest. She was gone. And just like that, everything we had built together, every moment we had shared, was now a distant memory. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, before the reality of it hit me. Claire was gone, and the worst part was, I couldn't even bring myself to care anymore. The anger that had been building up in me had turned to something else, a numbness, a feeling of betrayal that cut so deep, I didn't know where to start. I thought about calling her, asking her to explain, to give me something, anything, that would make this make sense. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had made her choice. She had moved on. And in that moment, I realized something else, something even harder to swallow. I was the last to know. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling, my mind spinning. I tried to think of what to do next, but the truth was, I didn't know. I had never been here before. I didn't know how to deal with this kind of pain, this kind of betrayal. I had spent so many years trying to keep our marriage together, to make it work, and now it was falling apart in front of me. The more I thought about it, the more it sank in. She had been hiding things from me for months, maybe even longer. The dinners she claimed were work events, the late nights she spent working, the secrecy around her phone. All of it was a lie. And now, she was gone, with no explanation, no remorse. Just an empty house and a broken heart. I needed answers. I needed closure. But how was I supposed to get that from a woman who had already shut me out completely? I couldn't just let it go. I had to find out the truth. I had to confront her, even if it meant facing something I wasn't ready to hear. The next morning, I drove to the office. Claire's office. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but something inside me told me that if I was ever going to find any peace, I had to understand the full extent of what had been going on behind my back. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, but when I told her who I was, her face faltered for a second, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She knew what was coming. "I need to speak with Claire," I said, my voice steady but with a hint of desperation that I couldn't hide. "I'm afraid she's not in right now," the receptionist replied, her voice calm but tinged with something else. "Guilt, maybe? She's on personal leave for a few days. Can I help you with anything?" I didn't want to push. I didn't want to seem like the crazy husband, showing up unannounced, but I needed to know. I needed something to make sense of this madness. "Can you tell me where she's staying?" I asked, my voice a little softer now. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "I'm not sure, Mr. Owen, right? I really can't give out that kind of information." I nodded, realizing that I wasn't going to get anything from her. But as I turned to leave, a name floated into my head. A name I hadn't thought about in a long time. Steve. Steve was Claire's old boss, someone she had worked with closely for years before he moved to another company. He was the kind of guy who always seemed a little too friendly, a little too charming. But I never thought much of it. Maybe it was time to reach out to Steve. Maybe he could shed some light on all of this. I left the office, my mind made up. If Claire wasn't going to give me answers, then I was going to find them myself. I wasn't going to sit around and let this mystery fester. It was time to take control. Time to find out just how deep this betrayal really went. The drive to Steve's office felt longer than it actually was. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about Claire's life when she wasn't around me. I mean, we shared everything, or so I thought. I used to be her go-to person for advice, for company, for comfort. But lately, it felt like there was a wall between us, and I couldn't get over it. I had ignored it, pushed it aside, convinced myself it was just a phase. But now, with everything crashing down, I had no choice but to face the reality that Claire had her own secrets. I had been living in the dark. As I approached Steve's office building, my hands tightened around the steering wheel. I had no idea what I was going to say to him. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know the truth. But the need for answers, for closure, overpowered everything else. I parked the car and stood outside for a few moments, taking in the stillness of the afternoon. It was almost like the world was holding its breath. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, but there was no turning back now. I had to go through with it. The receptionist at Steve's office was just as cordial as the one at Claire's company, but when I mentioned Steve's name, she hesitated. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Thompson is in a meeting right now," she said, her voice polite but laced with a nervous undertone. "Is there something I can help you with?" I could feel her eyes on me as I stood there, unsure of what to do. I had hoped for an easy way in, but there was no easy route to this conversation. I wasn't just some stranger. I was her husband, the man she had promised her life to. "I'm sure he'll want to know I'm here," I said, trying to sound confident, though I didn't feel that way inside. "It's about Claire." The mention of Claire's name seemed to change something in the receptionist's demeanor. She paused, then looked at me with a knowing expression, almost as if she had been expecting me. "I'll let him know you're here," she said, standing up and walking toward the back of the office. The air around me felt heavy, and my thoughts raced. What would Steve say when he saw me? How much did he know? Was Claire really seeing him? Was I about to confront the man who had been a part of whatever was happening behind my back? A few minutes later, the receptionist returned and led me into Steve's office. As I walked in, I saw a man in his mid-40s, tall and well-groomed, with an air of authority about him. He was sitting behind his desk, looking over a pile of papers. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he stood up, offering me a firm handshake. "Mr. Howard," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of curiosity. "What can I do for you?" "Steve," I began, my voice steady but filled with an urgency I couldn't hide. "I need to talk to you about Claire." His expression changed instantly. It was subtle, but it was there, a flicker of something that I couldn't quite place. I couldn't tell if it was guilt, surprise, or something else entirely. But it didn't matter. I needed answers, and I wasn't leaving until I got them. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, trying to keep my composure. "I'm afraid I don't understand," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Is there something wrong with Claire?" I studied him closely, trying to read between the lines. His tone was too calm, too rehearsed. I could tell he was hiding something, but whether it was guilt or something else, I couldn't be sure. But I wasn't about to back down. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locking onto his. I know about Ben, I said, my voice low, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The change in Steve's face was immediate. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flickered to the side for just a moment before he regained his composure. He cleared his throat. Ben? What about him? His response was quick, too quick, and I could tell he was trying to steer the conversation away from the real issue. But it was too late. I could see it now. The guilt was all over his face. Don't play dumb, Steve, I said, my frustration boiling over. I know what's been going on. Claire's been spending time with him, and I'm guessing you've been more involved than you're letting on. Steve's expression faltered, just for a second, before he quickly recovered. I'm not sure what you think you know, Owen, he said, trying to sound calm, but his voice was strained. Claire and I work together. That's all. She's a valued member of the team. She's been under a lot of pressure lately, and I've been trying to help her out. I wanted to laugh, but the anger building up inside me wouldn't let me. Help her out? By having secret meetings with her? By becoming her confidant when I should have been the one she turned to? I took a deep breath, trying to control the rage that was threatening to explode. What else have you been doing, Steve? How far does this go? Steve looked at me, his face hardening. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his tone now firm, almost defensive. Claire is an adult. She can make her own decisions. Whatever she's been going through, it's her business, not mine. And certainly not yours. I could feel the tension between us thickening. Steve's words were calculated, designed to deflect, to make me doubt myself. But deep down, I knew he was lying. There was something more to this, something he wasn't telling me. You don't get to play the good guy, Steve, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm not leaving here without the truth. The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, I thought he might finally crack, might finally admit to whatever was going on. But instead, he just stared at me, cold and indifferent. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again, his voice calmer this time. I don't know what you're hoping for here, Owen. But if you're looking for some kind of closure, I'm afraid you won't find it from me. Claire has already made her choices. With those words, I knew. I knew that whatever had been happening between Steve and Claire was far worse than I had imagined. And now, I had to face the hardest part. I had to confront Claire herself. The drive back from Steve's office felt like an eternity. My mind was in overdrive, trying to piece everything together. The conversation with Steve had barely scratched the surface, but I could feel it. I was getting closer. The truth was out there somewhere, and I wasn't going to rest until I found it. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't go on with Claire as if nothing had changed. She had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Claire wasn't back yet, which only added to the tension that had been building in my chest. I walked into the living room, staring at the spot on the couch where she'd sat just a few nights ago. The same place where she had confessed that she was unhappy. The place where she had, in the most devastating way, broken the vows we'd made to each other. I sat down on the couch, my thoughts swirling around in a mess of anger and confusion. I didn't even know where to start. What had happened to the woman I had married? The woman I thought I knew better than anyone? It wasn't just about the affair, it was the lies, the secrecy, the way she'd pushed me aside when I'd only tried to be there for her. I pulled out my phone, feeling an urge to reach out to her, to ask for the truth. But then I stopped. She had given me nothing but excuses, nothing but half-truths. I had already wasted enough time on that. I wasn't going to beg her to admit what had happened. I already knew. The truth was, she had checked out long before I had ever gotten the courage to ask. It wasn't until I heard the front door open that I finally snapped back into reality. Claire walked in, her expression unreadable, her face pale. I could see the way her eyes flickered over to me, her breath catching as if she wasn't sure how to act. "Hi," she said, her voice sounding forced. "I didn't expect you to be home yet." I didn't respond. I just stared at her, my mind racing. She could try to act casual, but I wasn't playing this game anymore. Not after everything I had found out. Not after everything she had put me through. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. I wasn't going to let her avoid this anymore. She owed me an explanation. She flinched slightly but quickly recovered, stepping further into the room. "I told you. I was out with a friend from work. You know, just catching up." "A friend?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's funny. Because I've been talking to your friend, Steve. He says you two have been spending a lot of time together. Her face immediately turned white, her eyes widening in disbelief, and I knew I had her. You spoke to Steve? She stammered, her voice tight, almost defensive. Owen, you don't know what you're talking about. I stood up, walking toward her, my pulse quickening as I got closer. The anger I had been holding back for weeks was rising to the surface. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Claire. Don't lie to me. I know about Ben, and I know you've been seeing him. You've been lying to my face for months. How could you do this to me? To us? She took a step back, clearly rattled, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she just stood there, biting her lip, like she was trying to come up with a reason that would make it all okay. But there was no excuse. There was no justification for what she had done. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. You're not the problem, Owen. I don't feel the same anymore. I haven't for a while. That was it. That was the line that broke me. Don't you dare say that. I snapped, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. You've been lying to me for months, and now you're going to tell me that it's not my fault? That it's just because you don't feel the same anymore? Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just stared at me, like she was trying to read my face, to find some hint of understanding or sympathy. But there was nothing left inside me to give. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore, not like this. I needed to get out of this room, away from her, before I did something I'd regret. I turned around and walked toward the door, grabbing my jacket as I went. Owen, wait, she called out, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Don't bother, I said, my voice cold, harder than I intended. I'm done waiting for you to fix this. I'm done pretending everything's okay when it's not. I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. The night air hit me like a slap in the face. I didn't know where I was going, didn't even care. I just needed to get away, to breathe, to think. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step I took felt like I was walking away from everything I had ever known, everything I had ever believed in. I drove aimlessly for a while, not caring about the direction, not caring about anything except the anger and betrayal that burned in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to do something, anything, to make the pain stop. But there was no escaping this feeling, no way to go back to the way things were. After what felt like an eternity, I pulled over and stopped the car. I didn't know why, but something inside me told me I needed to think. I needed to make a decision, a choice, because I couldn't keep living in limbo. I couldn't keep waiting for Claire to decide whether or not she wanted me. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew this wasn't something I could walk away from anymore. If Claire had already made her choice, then I would make mine. I need you to start the divorce papers, I said, my voice steady, the decision final. And with that, I felt something shift inside me. The uncertainty was gone. The pain was still there, but I had finally taken control. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, unanswered questions, and a strange sense of finality. I had made my decision. The divorce papers were in motion. But despite the coldness of my decision, something inside me kept hoping for a moment of reconciliation, a moment where Claire would come to her senses and realize what she was about to lose. I don't know why I still had hope. After everything that had happened, after everything she had done behind my back, the part of me that still loved her was desperate for any sign that she cared, that this wasn't just some long, drawn-out goodbye. But Claire wasn't making it easy. Every time I came home, she acted as if nothing was happening. She'd go about her day like she hadn't just shattered my world. I couldn't stand it anymore. The house, once a place of comfort and security, now felt like a prison. I couldn't stay there with her, not when she was so cold, so distant. One evening, after another round of awkward silence between us, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see it through. I had to confront her one last time. I found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner, just like she had done so many times before. She didn't notice me at first, focused on chopping vegetables, her hands moving mechanically. The familiar sound of the knife against the cutting board made everything feel so normal, but I couldn't pretend anymore. Claire, I said, my voice firm but not shouting. She looked up, and for a moment, her eyes softened. But then, she quickly turned away, almost as if she were trying to hide from me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I wasn't going to let this go. Not anymore. Are you really going to keep acting like everything is fine? Like I don't know what's been happening? I asked, my words coming out in a rush. You've been lying to me, Claire. You've been sneaking around with Ben, and who knows who else. You've been gone for days, telling me everything's fine, but it's not. You've made your choice, haven't you? She froze, the knife in her hand stilling for a moment before she put it down on the counter. I saw the faintest flicker of regret in her eyes, but it was gone in an instant. I don't know what you want me to say, Owen, she replied, her voice tired, almost defeated. I told you, I'm not happy anymore. I haven't been for a long time. I've been trying to figure out what I wanted, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep lying to you. I took a deep breath, trying to hold myself together. You should have told me. You should have told me the truth. But instead, you kept me in the dark, thinking everything was fine when it wasn't. You owe me that, Claire. The truth. She glanced at me then, her eyes narrowing, as if she was deciding whether or not to say more. But after a moment, she shook her head. I didn't want to hurt you, Owen. I never wanted it to end like this, but I can't live a lie anymore. I thought I could. I thought we could fix things. But I was wrong. The finality in her voice hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't wanted to hear it, but here it was. The woman I had spent years with, the woman I had built my life around, had given up. She had already moved on, and I was the one left behind. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The silence between us stretched on, thick and suffocating. I thought I'd be angry, but instead, all I felt was numb. It wasn't the rage I thought I'd feel when I confronted her. It was a quiet, hollow ache, the kind that only comes when you realize you've been living in a lie for far too long. I didn't realize how much I've been avoiding this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been a good husband, Owen. I've just changed, and I don't think we can fix this anymore. It was the truth. I could see it in her eyes, feel it in the air between us. She wasn't the same person I had married. She had already checked out, emotionally, mentally, long before I had even figured out what was happening. Then why didn't you just say it? I asked, the words coming out quieter than I meant. Why did you let me live in this fantasy that we were fine when you were already gone? Her face crumpled for just a second, but she quickly wiped the expression away. I don't know, she said, almost to herself. I don't know why I kept it all inside. Maybe I was scared. Scared of hurting you. Scared of losing everything we had. But now, it's already lost, Owen. I stood there, the weight of her words settling heavily on my chest. The silence stretched out between us again, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't a silence of confusion or uncertainty. It was a silence of acceptance. We had both reached the point where there was no turning back. I didn't know how long we stood there, just looking at each other, both of us exhausted in our own way. But eventually, I turned and walked out of the room, unable to stay there another minute. I went to the front door, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside, leaving Claire behind in the house that no longer felt like a home. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I had to get away, to clear my head, to figure out what was next. But even as I stepped into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about love, about marriage, about trust, had been shattered. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the man who was always left behind. The next few days felt like I was in a fog, everything happening around me in slow motion. I tried to keep busy, to pretend like I was okay, but the truth kept gnawing at me. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. My life, the life I had carefully built with Claire, had been flipped upside down, and I was left standing there, trying to pick up the pieces. I had tried to be patient. I had tried to give her space, to make her feel comfortable enough to tell me what had been going on. But now, I realized that no amount of waiting would bring back the woman I thought I knew. She had already left me, and she didn't even have the decency to give me a chance to understand what had happened. It wasn't until the weekend rolled around that I finally found myself standing in front of the divorce lawyer's office. I hadn't wanted to do it. I hadn't wanted to take that final step. But after everything that had happened, there was no way back. I knew I couldn't live in limbo any longer, holding on to something that no longer existed. I had to let go. I had already talked to the lawyer about the initial steps, about what I needed to do to move forward. It felt like a lifetime ago, but at the same time, it felt like I was still stuck in that same moment when Claire told me she was leaving. I could hear her words in my mind, echoing in my head like some broken record. I don't love you anymore. I can't do this. And I hated myself for letting her go without a fight, for letting her control the narrative. But now, as I walked into the lawyer's office, it was finally sinking in. This was it. There was no going back. The lawyer greeted me with the usual cold professionalism, a quick handshake and a seat at the desk. We went through the usual formalities, discussing the next steps in the process, but I couldn't focus. All I could think about was Claire, about the life we had built together, about how quickly everything had fallen apart. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand how she could just walk away from everything we had worked for. I had given her everything. I had been there for her, supported her, loved her with everything I had. And this was how she repaid me. Mr. Howard, we can proceed as soon as you sign the papers, the lawyer said, snapping me out of my thoughts. If you're ready to move forward, we can begin the process of filing for divorce. You'll need to get a separation agreement in place. I nodded absent-mindedly, my eyes still fixed on the papers in front of me. I had made my decision. I couldn't keep living in the past, couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. But as I signed the papers, something inside me broke. This was real now. There was no going back. I wasn't just losing Claire. I was losing everything I had ever known. Thank you, Mr. Howard, the lawyer said as he handed me the papers. We'll take care of the next steps. You'll be hearing from us soon. I left the office in a daze, not even sure where I was going or what I was doing. The city felt like a blur as I walked through the streets, the weight of the papers in my hand reminding me of the finality of it all. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to face that empty house, that silence that had become so suffocating. Instead, I found myself at a bar, sitting alone at a table, nursing a drink as the world around me continued to spin. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't looking for comfort or distractions. I was just lost. But then, as if on cue, I saw her. Claire. She walked in, looking just as beautiful as ever, her hair falling perfectly around her face, her smile as fake as it always was now. She didn't see me at first, didn't notice me sitting in the corner, but I saw her. And for a moment, I wanted to walk up to her, to scream at her, to demand to know why she had done this to me. But I didn't. I couldn't. She wasn't alone. There was a man with her, sitting beside her at the bar, laughing with her as if nothing was wrong. His hand brushed against hers, and I saw her smile at him, the same smile she used to give me. My stomach turned. It was like a knife twisting in my gut, a reminder of everything I had lost. For the first time, I saw it clearly. Claire had moved on. She had already found someone else, and I was nothing but a ghost in her past. I didn't stay long. I couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't watch her with him, the man who was taking my place in her life. I left the bar quickly, my mind racing, my thoughts jumbled. But the image of them together stayed with me, haunting me, reminding me of everything I had given up. I walked home that night, not feeling anything. The numbness had settled in again, but this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't the numbness of confusion or disbelief. It was the numbness of acceptance. I had lost Claire, and I wasn't going to get her back. When I got home, I threw my keys on the counter and walked to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The house felt empty, like a shell, a place I no longer recognized. I looked around, taking in the space we had shared for so many years, and it hit me all at once. This was it. There was no more us. There was only me now, alone. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know how to move forward. But as I sat there in the darkness, I realized one thing. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest I had ever faced. It wasn't just the divorce. It was the aftermath, the realization that the life I had known was no longer mine. I spent my days lost in thought, trying to find the strength to put one foot in front of the other. The house felt like a prison, a reminder of everything that had slipped through my fingers. Claire's absence was a shadow that lingered in every corner, and I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. But over time, something shifted. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to rebuild. The process wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like giving up. But little by little, I began to reclaim the parts of myself that I had lost. I spent time with friends who reminded me what it meant to laugh again. I focused on my work, throwing myself into it with a dedication I hadn't felt in months. I even took up a hobby I'd always wanted to try, photography. It didn't change everything overnight, but it gave me something to focus on, something to create. Then, one afternoon, I found myself sitting in a small cafe, sipping coffee, watching the world go by. I had just finished a photo shoot for a friend's business, and for the first time in a long while, I felt content. Not happy, not yet, but at peace with myself. I wasn't rushing through life anymore, trying to outrun the pain. I was sitting with it, feeling it, accepting it. That's when she walked in. Her name was Emily. I had met her a few weeks earlier at a photography class I had joined. We had hit it off right away, bonding over our shared love of capturing the world through a lens. She had a warmth about her, a kindness that drew people in. She had been patient with me, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. She spotted me as she entered the cafe, a smile lighting up her face as she made her way toward my table. I smiled back, something inside me flickering for the first time in months. "Hey, Owen," she said, pulling out the chair across from me. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," I replied, surprised by how easy it was to smile again. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She listened without judgment, her presence a comforting balm to the wounds that had been left in my heart. There was no pressure, no rush. Just two people connecting, two people who had each experienced their own pain but were now moving forward. That evening, as I walked home, something inside me clicked. I wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship. I wasn't looking for someone to replace Claire. But what I had found in Emily was something simple, something real. It wasn't about replacing the past. It was about moving forward into a future that I had the power to shape. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that promised everything would be perfect. It was the kind of hope that told me I could survive, that I could find joy again, that life wasn't over just because one chapter had closed. I had spent so long trying to hold on to what was slipping away, but now, I realized something important. I didn't need to hold on. I needed to let go. The road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I wasn't afraid of what was coming. I had learned to trust myself again, and that was enough.